Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It's been a minute, but we have returned for another Rep of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you fine feathered individuals. Hope you had a fantastic holiday season. And as we're heading towards that new year, it's now time to look at not just the best plays, but the best games or matches that we had throughout 2025. And I'm going to hit you with a spoiler right now. This is the biggest example of why the LCK is so far ahead of everybody else, because the majority of the best, highest quality games of the year came from that region.
It's a familiar taste, I think we can say, when we're looking at a lot of these games and you're trying to narrow it down, a top 10, a top 5 of the games and the excitement that you felt with them throughout the year. Yeah, the consistent thread that you can pull along is that LCK, is that T1 and Gen G excitement and domination that they bring to the forefront in every match that they're playing in. So no question that they will be a very healthy percentage of this list, but there still are a handful, a small 1 or 2 matches that squeak their way on through here and are worthy of mentioning when we look back at some of the most exciting and greatest games that we did get in 2025.
And we're starting with the only game on this list that did not feature an LCK squad, and there were a couple of banger back and forths both at MSI and the World Championship between the Flying Oysters and Anyone's Legend, but we're going to Game 2 of their best of 5 at the Midseason Invitational, and this is the one where there's a 7k gold lead for AL. It looks like it's going to be a clean, swift 2-0 start to the series. A 3-man improbable Skarner ulti out of Junjia gets them back into this game in one single fight, and then there's a TP for space defense out of AL to hold on, but it ultimately ends up being a comeback, falling short, unfortunately, for the Flying Oysters and the LCP.
Yeah, and this is one of those ones where I think really, you can talk about the consequences of this matchup, right? Of moving to 2-1 in the situation, 1-2 type of one. This was absolutely a crucial matchup for both of these squads, and to have that type of pushback, be able to show out as the Oysters and really make this that interesting matchup, that really was a big part of it, and kind of verifying, and again, really extra solidification for this squad of saying, look, we're a real deal team. We're not going to be one of these, you kind of give yourself a little bit of a warning and then, they didn't really show up at the event. We will be here, and we are going to be a tough out at this event. And you saw that all the way through this series, and especially when you're down 8k gold and able to find a way back into it.
And again, this was at MSI. There was also, you can look at their series across the board. I guess 1-5 were the Flying Oysters against AL, but they were very contested in all the losses at MSI and the ones at the World Championship. But yeah, this one, it's a little anticlimactic that if the full comeback happens, you might have this list higher on best games of the year, because yes, there's got to be throws anytime there's a 7k deficit that gets erased, but the throws were not that egregious by Anyone's Legend, and really the biggest throw was actually probably Kaiwing just kind of walking into the base and missing a hook on Nautilus to lose the game and have the comeback fall short.
Oh, so painful, because again, skills, abilities like that Nautilus hook shot, it's one of those ones where he rides that line of being able to swing the game for your team and swing the game for the enemy team if it is of that type of egregious degree, in which unfortunately comes through on the side for Anyone's Legend to capitalize and take this one through. But really getting this type of showdown, seeing this type of power from both of these squads at an MSI event really was kind of the extra sweetness, I think, when you're looking at this matchup and what we had seen from them, and having that performance from the Oysters at this one Boister, what you thought about them, really like looking back on this series and looking back at these two tangling down with each other on Summoner's Rift.
Yeah, and again, if you were going best series, not individual game, I think these squads would still be making it. Probably more so the Worlds one than the MSI. Hope you enjoyed talking non-LCK, though, because there's a heavy dosage of LCK going forward on this list. When we look at that number 4 spot, we're going to the semifinals. Gen G versus KT, and the very first game of this best of 5 that really had the biggest implications of the whole thing, if you're asking me, because this is Gen G in control all the way the early game. KT stops the bleeding with a slick Nico engage out of Peter to kind of get back into it, but it's still very much Gen G in control, if not for a couple of big mistakes from their big stars. And we've talked about this insane play between BDD's Yone and Keen Scion, but it only gets to this point because Canyon dives a little too deep on the Vi.
And this is really where it kind of is one of the more unique options that you can talk about within a list like this, because normally you're talking so much about these excellent plays, all the outstanding moments that really are bringing it up. But for me, it really is this mistake that Canyon makes that allows for this play to happen, allows for the series to change in this type of regard. That was really the moment for me, and why this game specifically stands out so much in this series and the importance that it plays later on down the World Championship.
And this, I know people like to harp on Chovy for this series. I think he was actually fine in the Stalia game in the first one. But there was some, despite a couple of mistakes out of Gen G, there was some immaculate play out of not just BDD's Yone, who gets them back into the game 2, 3, 4 times, but Doc Dom's Caitlyn and the trap control that he has over neutral objectives throughout this game, especially the Elder Dragon. There's really no chance for Gen G to ever contest some of these neutral objectives.
There's enough games and enough up and down throughout last year that you can get to look at the finals of a T1 KT and go, well, how did this happen? How did KT find their way over here? You watch this game. You watch these performances, this level up. This is a different KT roster than the KT roster you saw through the majority, heck, almost the entirety of the year to that point. So yeah, this is where I think it is really important, and you do want to raise the stakes of this game because of this table and precedent that it sets for KT at this event to set them up to be a world finalist at the end of it all.
And with a head-to-head between these two squads, you might even want to throw the BDD Zoe game in terms of one of the best games of the year. And if you were going individual performer, yes, you would absolutely throw that in there. But in terms of, we're kind of taking in the criteria of back and forth and high quality, high caliber of gameplay throughout. And no question, game one was probably the highest quality that we got in this entire semifinals tilt between them. Because remember, 3-1 didn't even go to a game 5 in this. But honestly, with how in control Gen G was, if they won this first game, you're probably talking about them winning the whole series.
It's a massive difference maker, and especially when you're talking about, all the unquantifiable things. And I think that is really where then, again, a squad like KT benefits more than almost anyone else when you can have those unmeasurables come through and be a factor and help raise you up, lower the gap between you, whatever situation, where then it's possible. And to not set the tone, to not put that first nail in the coffin as Gen G, as this dominant, overwhelming force that should and was expected to reach the finals, was a big deal to come away with that one as KT.
And Gen G being an absolute dominant force throughout the year is why they're featured on this list quite a bit. And a share of heartbreak and ecstasy out of the results from them. Unfortunately, I'm not going to call it heartbreak in their Game 4 showdown against T1 in the MSI upper bracket finals, because remember, they played each other twice, 2 best of 5s. This is the first round action between them, and down 2-1, the T1 plot armor gets activated. This was some insane back and forth team fighting, often netting just a single kill either way. Gen G eventually gets a couple of Barons, but can never really snowball this lead out of control. And then it's the patented extended T1 team fight, and Doran on the Gragas finding pick and engage after engage.
And it was crazy because his stat line, his performance throughout that series was nothing to really write home about all the way through till that point where he comes up big time in that Game 4 for T1. Yes, you're looking at the stats and the numbers, and you're looking more for the contributions from Faker, from Gumayushi on the Corki, but still the plays that Gragas, that Doran is able to make to set up this rest of this T1 team and to set up the advantages and pressure that they're able to push through and take this and force a Game 5 at the end of it all. Yeah, I think that absolutely is one of the big things to keep track of with this one. And again, the evolution of this iteration of T1 that are our eventual world champions, you can see some of that DNA, some of that, strength testing that you have here, getting this type of result and pushing to that silver scrapes, even if it isn't going to go the way that you want it to at the end of it all. Getting to that game 5, always an important thing to keep track of. And again, even if it doesn't equal out an MSI championship, I'm sure the discussions during the World Championship run and specifically the important matches in the quarters, semis, and finals, you had to be looking back on your tenacity at this type of moment and the way that you were able to do this here as T1. And if you're Gen G, yeah, this isn't the greatest thing to look back on, fumbling this one, but you do come through at the end of the day and do secure yourself another title, so you can't take that with you at least.
Yeah, and you're telling me the T1 World Championship pedigree hasn't been fueled in the fires of losing domestic and MSI matchups to Gen G throughout the entire year? It's absolutely been the case, and why they were so, lethal and immune to pressure. They've been fueled in those Gen G fires, and Gumayushi eventually, it was 3 Barons that Gen G got, and they lose the game, which, you can go to the stat books and look that up all time, but that does not happen very often in these professional games. And again, it was Gen G getting those last laughs as they would come away with an MSI title. T1 plot armor was powerful, but not enough in that series against Gen G. But it was at critical mass in what was their biggest test of that World Championship run, and it wasn't the semifinals. It wasn't those finals going Game 5 against KT. It was the matchup against anyone's legend, where you were sitting there going, this is crazy that this is a quarterfinal matchup, number 1, and AL coming in here for the second time, but this game looked so good for AL early on. They get 3 kills. Flandre's Aatrox is completely unkillable, and Owner doesn't know how to play Dr. Mundo.
Oh my God, this was absolutely crazy. This series and the way that it played out and all the dramatics that we had through it, I'm glad that we could throw it on a list like this where it really deserves to be examined, because you had the initial punch and you had the momentum for anyone's legend to finally be the LPL squad, to oust T1, and especially to kick them out at this point, at that quarterfinal stage, would have been very significant.
Earliest exit ever would have been for T1.
Of course, it doesn't happen, though, because you have the T1 magic, you have Owner figuring it out on the fly on Dr. Mundo with the rest of the T1 squad later. But yes, really important for me is that Game 4, where T1 is able to push it to that silver scrapes. Once again, kind of continuing that conversation about when you're looking at the MSI situation with T1 and Gen G, you find it again, an opportunity to put yourself in that final matchup, and that is what you do. And when you are a T1, you take your chance no matter what, when it is that do or die, and that's what they set themselves up with against anyone's legend. And even in that Game 5, there were avenues, I think, for anyone's legend to push back, to find a way, make it a series and make that game matter. It did matter, but it was that decisive blow for T1 at the end of the day in that Game 5.
Yeah, and Faker's Mel kind of keeps them in this game for a while despite being at a deficit. He steals the Otacon, and you can hear the Chinese crowd just itching to scream, to eliminate T1, the big bad that has been bullying them for better part of a decade on the international stage, and it can't be done. Even in this final insane extended team fight where they try to catch out the Fed, Aatrox can't kill him, he TPs back in. It looks like T1 has overextended, but you see the frustration in Tarzan as they can't kill Gumayushi's Ashe.
Oh, yeah, just the kiting is so immense on what Guma was able to do, and it is the best play that you're seeing from an ADC at this World Championship, no question, for me, when you're looking at that and how he executed it and what was required to execute on as that position, as that role for T1 in order to succeed in that moment. I think, again, the other thing kind of blown through, we were talking about Faker's Mel in the Game 5, fearless draft, pushing it to that extent and busting it out and being able to be a factor, to be that thing that holds T1 in this game, despite the overwhelmingly fed Aatrox on the side of anyone's legend, until it becomes a point where Guma is online, is able to have that damage on top of his incredible kiting skills to finally take down this raid boss, to finally take out anyone's legend from the World Championship.
And the Mel pick, let's be honest, was memed the whole tournament. It was winless for so long, had next to no impact. Most guys looked underwhelming on it, but of course, it's the GOAT putting together the best individual performance on that pick throughout the entire tournament. Before we get to that best game of 2025, we got to give a nice little shout out. I'm not going to call it the worst. I'm going to call it the most fun game of the year, and threw this out to the public to see what games they remembered the most or was their best game. And a lot of people were talking about the DN Freaks versus Freddie Brion. We're talking a 1-20 DN Freaks at this point with an incredibly impressive throw, up 7,000 gold. And they have a comp of Sion, Azir, Senna. Mark, this is the ultimate of Omega Exodia scaling comps. And they proceed to try and rush the game, close it out quickly with all these scaling comps in classic DN Freaks fashion. Even Berserker himself getting caught out 2 different times in key team fights on the Senna.
If you ever needed an example, a quick sampling of why it never worked out whatsoever for the DN Freaks, I think this really is the best sampling that you can have of the dubious food that was served up by the DN Freaks all year round. Yeah, I think this is one of those ones where you can kind of, with a little bit of forefront asterisk put on the side of it, you can talk about this one in the same type of category because the excitement, the drama, it's all there within this one and within this comeback from the deficit that you are at as the Bros. But I don't think it deserves anywhere close to the same recognition that we are talking about as these other games and the significance and the plays that are made in them. But man, the excitement level, the thrill, if you're removing the nameplates and just trying to enjoy League of Legends action, I think you can make a case for this one.
And if you're maybe throwing some bets around or just looking to have a laugh on the Rift, then yes, this is the perfect epitome, the perfect example of the Fries group that was throughout 2025 and maybe a format that you want to be coming back because not the highest quality games, which is again why this one isn't actually cracking the list. But if you're looking for pure entertainment factor, then yeah, a lot of D+ games, a lot of Fries gaming matchups, even with the DN Freaks sometimes. That's why the LCK is, so highly rated and highly viewed, because you have that top upper echelon, but you also have that bottom tier, which is a treat for sore eyes.
Yeah, and especially when you split it up the way that it works out with a Fries group type of situation that can play out in the LCK, you can get to appreciate it a little bit more, seeing these type of matchups where they're playing out like this. This was a special one all the way through. You're not going to see too many of these throughout the year, and especially not too many of these in the LCK. So always a fun one to take a trip back and remember.
Palate cleanser, that match. Now we get back to what was the best game, individual game of 2025. It's not ALT1 Game 5. We got to go Game 2 of the quarterfinals. Again, Hanwha Life versus Gen G, and this is absolutely not a quarterfinal matchup you would have been expecting. Again, this is like finals caliber, and Game 2 very much so was that. This was the longest game of Worlds, well north of 50 minutes, and we got a 50-minute Ziggs game out of Viper that was doing his very best to keep Hanwha alive in this series.
If you look back at the T1 Anyone's Legend matchup that you had in the quarterfinals, that one obviously still delivered so much excitement, so many thrills, so much pushback that you felt like it was like a World's Finals. In comparison to looking at this Gen G and Hanwha Life series, very much so slot that one, dial it back to looking like a semifinals for a World Championship one, because there's no question that this matchup, Gen G and Hanwha Life, is a potential alternate history, alternate world timeline, universe, whatever. This was a World Championship Finals that played on out between both of these squads. It was unbelievable that we had this in the quarterfinals.
And, I mean, from individual, the snap engages out of both these squads highlighted why they were top-tier LCK teams, but individual mechanical plays, you had Duro doing what he does best in buffering the Poppy ulti to stay in a fight and win it for Gen G, and then you have the combo of a sick Zeka engage on the Azir to shuffle Ruler what looks like should be over the Baron pit, only to be denied by his old secret agent buddy Peanut, with the Xin Zhao ulti knocking him back out of the pit so he doesn't go in. Ruler ends up surviving the team fight, and that play alone might have been enough to shift this entire game.
It's a massive play because, again, having him stay alive, be in that opportunity, not have the death timer and the type of advantages you can start pushing for if you are the side of Hanwha Life. Mega differences in that one. Does stay alive, does find a way, and yes, that one does eventually go the way of Gen G in this series, and that was, I think, one of the biggest tipping points between both of these squads in the form that they were playing at and how they showed up on the day. To be able to come away with that game too, build that advantage, stay in that spot, that was the big one for me when you're looking at this from the Gen G perspective. And again, of course, you can't really pick much more of a better guy to save, to stay alive in that type of situation than Ruler. And the way that he was playing throughout that series, yeah, that can be the difference maker, just more than enough, that sliver between to separate these two fantastic squads in what was, again, a World Championship finals level of a clash between both of these here in the quarterfinals.
And what's craziest about this game and this series is the level that the games were at, both of these squads. It makes it even more insane that Gen G doesn't even get to finals, because you would think the confidence and state of play that comes after winning a series like this, they'd be able to run through to finals, but of course they end up falling to KT Rolster, which makes that whole series even a little bit more complexing to me.
Yeah, it kind of plays into partly the strength and the underdog card that KT would be able to play, of course, but I think part of it is just because of how significant, how stressful, how tested you were in this matchup. Again, so many times it can be either, okay, we're free, that's it, nothing can touch us, now we know what to do, or it can be kind of that fake, oh, nothing can touch us. Well, something can, and that is KT Rolster, and especially when you're not taking things as seriously as your opponent in the past.
Despite the heartbreak for Gen G, 2025 will be remembered as the year the LCK dominated absolutely everybody at absolutely every event. But that is it today for Liga Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, absolute stunners. Thanks so much for hanging out, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.